Time now to get the latest trends in dive retailing, travel, and training with Level Up, the podcast of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Now, here's your host, Scuba Radio's Greg the Dive Master.
And welcome. This is the first Level Up podcast for 2025. I am Greg the Dive Master from Scuba Radio. You can check it out every Saturday, 3 to 5 Eastern Time. However, today we dive deeper into the dive industry with some diving dignitaries. First up, of course, is Willie Klein, the man behind the madness of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Willie, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm way down in Curacao in the Southern Caribbean today.
Oh, God, I wish I was you. I mean, you're living large here, I guess.
It's not as good as where Neil's at, where iguanas are probably falling out of the trees.
Yes,
they'll start falling out probably tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, we're in the middle of a cold snap here in Florida. I'm in Orlando. Neil's in South Florida. We don't have the iguanas, but we got the cold for sure. So we may not have iguanas falling out of the tree, but if it keeps up like this, I might climb one and jump. But yeah, it's time to get deeper in the dive industry once again with Scuba Diving Industry Magazine, Level Up podcast, and we got a lot of stuff to cover today, right, Willie? What do you think?
We sure do. We got some great talent, great writers, great articles, and a special shout out to all of our authors for this particular issue. And thanks to everybody from the whole year. We're up to 48 contributors in the first 12 months, of which the most coolest thing is 20 of those are dive shop owners. So, we really, truly have met the goal of writing for professionals by professionals. And so we're really pleased about that. So, let's jump right into it. We got a lot to talk about.
We do indeed. And so we want to go to our first writer, right, from the magazine. That's what's up first.
Absolutely. Let's go to the Azores Islands first.
Wow. Catherine Castle Garcia, famous dive writer and hand model. It's a long story. You don't want to go there. But Catherine, good to see you. How are you?
Very well. It's after 9 p.m. It's a little past my bedtime here, but that's okay. I'd rather lose some sleep and be hanging out with you guys.
Well, it's always great to see you. I mean, it raises the bar for this cast of characters.
I love you guys.
I'm just speaking for me, not everyone else. But, okay, so the latest issue of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine, page 20, is about honing your marketing message, how to craft a one-liner. Are we talking comedy? What do you mean?
Well, I want to make a very important distinction here, because if Neil Watson was teaching this particular course, he might say that your one-liner starts with, "Hey, baby, you want to see where the shark bit me?" But that is not. It is not.
That's perfect.
I like it.
What we're talking about. Okay. I just, or if somebody on your staff at Scuba Radio was doing this segment, it might sound like that.
Yeah.
But your one-liner is essentially a really important question that you need to answer. And the question every single customer that comes through the door wants to ask, and is internally asking, is how will your product or service change my life for the better? And believe it or not, that question is the question we ask about everything. Humans are hardwired for more and better. So the question is, how will your product or service help me? How is it going to make things better for me? And then what do I have to do to get it? So that's what the article in this issue of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine is all about. And I take the reader through the steps of what is a one-liner, what needs to be in it, and how do you craft one that's going to attract your client?
I like it. I like it. I mean, it kind of breaks the ice and, brings them into the whole idea of continuing education and just getting into it, right? And just
Exactly. So your one-liner is a pickup line, but it's not a Neil Watson pickup line. It's like a G-rated explanation of what you're going to do for them.
Well, Neil does have a great one, Catherine, because I've seen it a million times and it works every time. He goes, "Hi, my name is Hi, my name is Neil." He gets down on one knee and proposes. And
I know.
It probably works for guys just as effectively as for ladies. I don't know, but
and it works for him. But for the rest of us, our one-liner needs to answer that question in three parts. For the rest of us, the answer needs to be answered with number one, what is the customer's problem or struggle? Why did they walk in the first place? And sometimes they don't even know, but we need to help identify what their problem or struggle is. We need to be able to articulate what the solution is that we're going to offer. And then we need to be able to tell them what the positive outcome is. After we reach into their wallet and grab their credit card, we need to be able to tell them how happy their life is going to be when they buy from us. So that's the three-part answer that is the one-liner. How am I going to solve your problem? What's my solution? And how awesome you're going to feel when that problem is solved. What's the positive outcome? Because you're going to become a scuba diver, you're going to go on a great vacation, you're going to get amazing gear, whatever the problem is that you are there to solve. That's what your one liner needs to tell them.
Right.
And it needs to be authentic. It needs to come from your heart so that you're not just trying to sell them a line. You need to be real with
and
it.
it's also not easy. It's not easy to do this. I mean, to be honest with you, they have another term for this is elevator pitch. In other words, if you had only had a few seconds to tell somebody your story or what you want to sell them, and believe it takes a tremendous amount of practice and discipline to come up with that process. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're a retailer out there, or you're a manufacturer and you got a sales guys out on the road or women out on the road, contact Catherine. You need someone to help you craft. You need a professional to do it right, because it's harder than it sounds. It really, truly is. And we tend to sum people up by just pure appearances, and that's the worst thing you can do, certainly in sales for sure.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Exactly.
I mean how they look, Willie? Is it?
Yeah, well, people have preconceived notions. Jen Adams wrote a great article from International Scuba Frisco. It's been months ago, but the article basically said that the mistake that she has seen herself and some of her staff make is they don't think that person can afford that regulator, so they don't pitch that regulator because of their preconceived notions is that they just simply can't afford it. Well, and you could be working at McDonald's on an hourly basis and might have saved up for the last 6 months to buy the best regulator there is out there. So you don't know. That's the most important thing, and that's a big mistake people do make. I think that you're spot on, Catherine, with the one-liner story. Page 20, everybody read it. It's really well done. There's even a little graphic that kind of has the summary of what she just said, basically in our podcast, and it truly is good stuff.
Well, there you go.
And
absolutely.
For those of you that are tuning in, I'm really excited that Scuba Diving Industry Magazine is sponsoring a free one-liner workshop that I'm delighted to bring to you. So right now, go to my website, clearstorycoach.com, download my free brand messaging guide so you can get a jump on this. And then the date for that is going to be January 22nd. You have to email me at hello@clearstorycoach.com to get the time. Because once I get the interest, I'm going to set the time. I'm coming to you from the Azores, and I'm going to just look at what the aggregate of my attendees are, and then we'll set a time for it. And we're actually going to Zoom this. And in the end of a 30-minute Zoom call, you're going to have the elements of your one-liner down, and you're going to be able to repeat it over and over again, teach it to your staff, and have everybody memorize it. So go to clearstorycoach.com.
That's awesome.
Download the branding guide, and let's get started.
I love it. And it won't include, hi, my name is Neil, except for the dive god himself, Neil Watson. All right. Well, next up, as part of our Level Up podcast, we have two guests. We're going to tag team this next topic from the Keys. Is that right, Willie? Or what?
Three guests.
Three.
We have three guests.
Okay.
Wow. And three
for one.
So let me set this up just a little bit. We've got Stephen Frink on audio only. He's driving the car, and we've got Jim and Tina from Dive Heart, and at the DEMA show just a couple months ago, he stopped by our booth and he was talking about this, their foundation, which is a really cool organization. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. Let him talk a little bit about it, But he said there's this video that we produced kind of on the Christ of the Abyss, the statue that's underwater in Key Largo. And I'm like, well, I never really thought about the history behind it. It's an incredible story. I'm going to turn it over to Steve because Steve shot the cover shot that's our actual December issue. It's Christ of the Abyss, so I thought it was very appropriate for December. But most importantly, it's a beautiful, beautiful photo. He's probably photographed, I'm guessing, the Christ statue more than anybody on this planet in Key Largo. So, Steve, tell us a little bit how you got the shot, and then we'll turn it over to Jim and Tina to talk a little bit about the foundation and the story behind the Christ of the Abyss.
All right.
Well, the Christ statue has really evolved. You wouldn't think necessarily that a bronze statue on a pedestal in 22 feet of water might have changed so much over the years, but the first time I saw it was when I came to town in Key Largo in 1978, and it looked like it looked. But then a friend of mine, Bernie Campoli, who was diving long before I was, he shot it shortly after it went down in 1965. And then I looked through some historical archives to better learn about the story. I was writing articles for Scuba Diving Magazine back then, and so I had to be fairly accurate in terms of how the Christ statue came to Key Largo. Although I got to say, Jim, I learned a lot from your documentary that I didn't know. I mean, I knew about the Underwater Society of America receiving the statue in Chicago, and I knew about them donating it and it being sunk in Pennicamp Park. So I knew the broad stroke details, and I knew that Pennicamp Park started in 1960. The statue came in 1965. But there was so much more depth to your story, and it was so well illustrated. So I want to take this opportunity to compliment you on the very deep dive you've done on, an artifact that has come to belong to all divers, certainly in the United States and absolutely in the Florida Keys. So good on you there. I don't know if I've answered your question, William, except that because it's underwater and because they didn't have the foresight, I think, to put sacrificial zincs on this statue, which might have preserved it from the corrosive effects of the ocean, which is good and bad, because over the years it acquired a cloak, a patina of sponge and coral, which has kind of ebbed and flowed. So I can go back in my archives and find a picture of the statue from 1978, which is pretty devoid of growth. Then on the 50th anniversary of Pennicamp Park, I photographed Sylvia Earle on the statue, and that was kind of like a midterm statue growth kind of thing. And then in like 2021, that was like the bloom of the Christ statue. It had most of the hard corals and the fire corals and soft corals, and it was like this whole quasi-artificial reef. And then, of course, in 2023, we had the warm water episode, which has transformed the statue yet again. And so now it's kind of in yet another renaissance. So if you're going to see the statue and you want to see it from the time machine perspective, it's really quite different.
Good stuff.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. That's great.
Yeah. And he has probably taken pictures of this, world-renowned landmark for divers more than anyone on this planet. Would you care to take that title there, Stephen, or are you too modest? What do you think?
No, I'll take the title.
Okay, good. That's what I was hoping you would.
Even now when I teach my classes in Key Largo, and, we might have 18 like really keen underwater photographers, and honestly, that the Christ statue is not a large enough like reef structure to satisfy 18 skilled shooters for 30 minutes or 40 minutes. But we do a flyby. Like when we go out to the city of Washington, we always stop, and half the boat jumps in for 15 minutes and half the other boat jumps in for 15 minutes. And so everybody gets which is enough time to photograph the statue, honestly. So every year, since I guess probably 1980, when I began doing these classes, multiple times a year I'm on the statue. So you add it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and being that they're in your class, yeah, I think you can take credit for their photos too. I'm just saying.
Yeah, if you think of it that way.
Sure.
I'll take co-credit on theirs.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Jim Elliott from Dive Heart, and I gotta back Stephen up here too. I saw the documentary online, and I was blown away, and I learned stuff about the Christ of the Abyss statue down there in Key Largo that I didn't know either. And Stephen's down there; he knows more about it than me, and it even caught him off guard. So it is impressive. How did this come to be exactly, Jim?
Well, Greg, Stephen, thank you for your kind words, and William, thank you for that amazing article that Patty did in the magazine. So kudos to all of you. It really is kind of a crazy story. If you watch a documentary, I pulled in David Marsh. I always say there's no chance meetings, and David did a documentary called Adapting to Dive. And when Gabe Spataro died last December, I was at the memorial and said, to his children, is it okay if I sponsor a documentary to have David Marsh do about the statue? Because I had learned about the statue years and years ago when I was training a bunch of blind veterans, and on a grant based on the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm teaching them. They're blind, so they're feeling all the equipment. And Gabe Spataro steps up and says, "Well, I've been diving since the '50s," and I'm like, "Well, why am I certifying you now?" He goes, "Well, we didn't need certification in the '50s. That was bootleg diving. I've been diving since '76." I go, "Yeah, you're right." So then he starts telling me a crazy story about how he brought the statue from Italy. He was on a wine tour, met Cressy. He went over there, to bring it over, and nobody had money to bring it over. So his dad knew somebody in an Italian shipping line, brought it to Navy Pier, and the story from there, it got warehoused for a while, and then it ended up in the Keys, and he completely forgot about it. And in 2013, I'm driving him back from a fundraiser, and he goes, "Jim, you're not going to believe it. I'm going to dive the Christ statue." And I go, "Well, you probably dove it a bunch of times. You brought it here in the early '60s. He goes, "No, I never dove it. It went in a warehouse for a few years. I got busy with my family restaurant in Chicago, and this is my first." I go, "Who are you diving it with?" He goes, "Well, my buddy Vinny, who's a Korean War vet like me, has one leg, and then Louis, who's also going blind, is got a 25-foot fishing boat." And I go, "Wait a minute, let me see if I got this right." The three guys in their late 70s are going to go out 8 miles or whatever to the statue, and you're all going to die. So I said, "Time out." So I called DJ Stephen, who you know well, DJ Wood at Rainbow Reef. The DJ couldn't believe the story. Cleared 8 paid spots on a Saturday. We got our team on, 20 people in a chase boat, cover the Miami Herald. It was just a home run. And I said, this story, when Gabe died in December, I said, this story has to be told. And I asked David Marsh if he would do it, and pulled him in. And DJ, Drew Richardson, everybody cooperated, Cressy's son and his grandson. And it's just an amazing story that had to be told.
Love it. Yeah. And you documented it so well. And they can people can find this. Obviously, you talk about it in the latest issue of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine, but on Dive Heart's website, that's how you get to it, or what, Jim?
Right. You can find it off of Dive Heart's website. You can also find it off of our YouTube channel. And you put in Legend of the Statue, and you'll find it right away.
All right. Perfect. Well, that's great stuff. Wouldn't you agree, Willie?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I just brought the cover up on you should be able to see it on my screen. It's really, truly a spectacular shot. So thank you so much for being on here, Jim, Tina. Thank you, Stephen, of course, for all of your incredible support. And again, if you don't know anything about Dive Heart, go to their website. We're going to link it in this video. We're going to put the video link at the bottom within the comment section. Go to their website too. They're a worthy organization, and they're doing great work.
Yep, diveheart.org. Simple as that. He's got the T-shirt to prove it. I love it. All right, so moving on to our next writer is our good friend Dan Orr. Dan, how you doing, buddy? Happy New Year to you. Yeah.
It was -2 degrees this morning when I got up.
Well, glad I'm not you. And but regardless, it's good to see you.
Good to be seen.
Is that water behind you, or are you frozen in a giant ice cube? I'm not sure.
I feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, in Scuba Diving Industry Magazine, latest issue, you write on page 7 about confronting the danger from within, immersion pulmonary edema, IPE. So what exactly is that?
Well, it actually is fluids that leak from your body tissue into your air sacs, your alveoli.
Gross.
Yeah, and it's something that's, even though there have been a number of articles written about it in some of the dive publications, there's not really been a lot of discussion about it in the diving community. So it's something that's considered relatively rare, but it's really caused by negative pressure breathing, where you're either working really hard trying to pull a lot of air or breathing gas through that regulator, or you're breathing through a small diameter snorkel, or your regulator is not tuned properly, and that fluid is pulled into or leaks into the air sacs, and it gives you symptoms like pneumonia. And it really is, and it really can be very deadly. And the people who are most at risk are people that have some underlying health issue, like a cardiovascular disease or some other heart-related problem, or older people, for example, or people who are overhydrated, because there's a lot of emphasis on hydration in diving. In fact, I wrote an article the previous month on hydration. And some people really overhydrate because they think that having so much fluid in your bloodstream is going to reduce the likelihood of decompression sickness. Well, really what happens is when you get in the water, that fluid shifts to the area in your central core. And if you are negatively pressure breathing, then it can kind of cause that fluid to leak into the air sacs, and it can be very, very deadly. In fact,
Wow.
the article is really very timely because today, the South Pacific Undersea Medical Society in Australia and the UK Diving Medical Committee just issued a statement about IPE. They call it IPO because they spell edema with an O. But they just issued a statement today that if you've had that condition, then they strongly recommend that you do not dive again.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, how do you know if you have this?
Wow.
I mean, or potentially you'll get it, or what?
You have fluid in your lung, you come up coughing. If you feel pressure in your chest, for example, or a lot of other things that would be similar to what you'd have if you have something like pneumonia or some sort of chest congestion, and you go to your physician, and hopefully the physician has some understanding of diving medicine, and then they can diagnose it and treat it. And it can be treated, but again, even if you've been treated, the recommendation now, it just came out today, is that you discontinue any further diving activity. And also it's timely because I got a call just a few days ago from a friend of mine who's a diving instructor who had a student who had that condition and was diagnosed with IPE by their physician.
Wow. Okay. Well, something to be aware of. And of course,
It
you
is.
get more details in the latest issue of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. And yeah, and hope you don't have it, I guess. That's what I would wish for everyone. Yeah.
I just posted
knowledge is king. At least you know. At least we know.
Exactly.
I just posted a link to that magazine on my Facebook page this morning.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan, as always.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, he's always keeping us in line for sure. All right, next
Thanks
up.
for scaring us all.
Sorry about that.
No, Patty read the article, my wife, and she goes, "What the heck is that? That's terrible."
Yeah. So next up, we got Alex Brilski, though. And I don't know if it'll be. It might be more optimistic. We'll see. Alex, how you doing, buddy? Welcome. Good to see you again.
When have you ever known me to be an optimist?
Well, I tried. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, page 16, carbon calculators, empowering sustainable air travel, which I'll tell you what, I'm in the thick of it right now, scheduling out the year. And I don't know, how can you help me if I want to try to have a positive impact on the planet? What do you think, Alex?
Well, this article was inspired by, watching all of the increasing awareness of the dive industry becoming more environmentally responsible, sponsoring things like trash pickups and coral transplantation. In the final analysis, we could pick up every piece of trash in the ocean and transplant every single coral on the planet. And it wouldn't make a diddly damn because we only have one singular environmental problem. That's climate change. And one of the ways that we can make a commitment as professionals and also from our own self-interest is to take a good look at these issues, the issue of emissions from air travel. Now, if you read the literature, only 2% of the carbon emissions globally come from airliners. But the real point is when these emissions occur in the stratosphere, even in the higher troposphere, the weather belt of the Earth, they are far more damaging because of for several reasons. I don't want to get into details, but it's not just the carbon they're emitting. They're emitting water vapor, which promotes cloud formation that can help keep heat into the Earth, ozone production, et cetera. And so even though it seems like a small portion of the total carbon footprint, it's particularly damaging. And so the question is, what can we do about this? Because we can't travel without getting on an airplane. Let's face it. And fortunately, there are things that can be done to pull back or sequester that carbon from the atmosphere and put it into some sort of biomass. The problem has been, well, where do I go and how do I do this? And that's where these carbon calculators came out, more than a decade ago. And what they do is that by completing a little, online process, they calculate how much CO2 you are going to be putting into the atmosphere according to the distance you're traveling. I flew to the Philippines a couple of years ago, and I forget, it was 0.20 or 0.02 tons of carbon, and it told me in that calculation that for about, I think, $6, I could make a donation that would pull that carbon out of the atmosphere. And so, as I said, these caught on some time ago, but more recently, an organization called the Ocean Foundation put together what I think, and I describe in the article, as the very best of these calculators. And I think it's the best because they only help to fund what are referred to as blue carbon initiatives, blue carbon projects, mangrove restoration, seagrass restoration, and things that will pull carbon into these ecosystems that are far superior to planting trees or doing anything else, because the capacity of these blue carbon systems is phenomenally greater than terrestrial systems. But this isn't all altruism, because by following the guidelines in the article, a dive operator can show a strong commitment to doing the right thing, and also by incorporating the carbon calculator into their travel segment of the website, they're able to make it kind of a one-stop shop, where, okay, I'm going to get my airline reservation, I'm going to travel 10,000 miles round trip. This pulls in X number of carbon. If I donate $8 to the Ocean Foundation project, they're going to contribute this to a project in Puerto Rico, for example, to restore X acres or hectares of seagrass meadows. And it's really a good way to tie in, to demonstrate, honest to God commitment to the environment, and with a positive business result in showing you're making that effort and making it easy for your customer to make that contribution.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that operators should probably look at. And I'm going to follow up next month and talk more about blue carbon and why that is so much more effective at carbon sequestration.
Well, that sounds good. Actually, I think some of the airlines and some of the travel search websites are actually figuring that in.
Yeah, a number of the airlines also have their own calculators, but but the Ocean Foundation is strictly involved with marine-based restoration.
Like it.
And those
Good
links
stuff.
are all in your article, too, by the way. So if you go to page, he's on let's see, you're on page 16, 16 and 17. All those links are there. So click on them, learn about it. Thank you, Alex.
Yep.
Good stuff, as always. All right, next up, we got Jeff Sincerapino from Rocky Hill, Connecticut, page 21. In with the new considerations for entering new dealer agreements. Jeff, welcome and Happy New Year to you, buddy.
Happy New Year, everybody. Coming off of DEMA, we were out there, and there's a lot of equipment out there, a lot of things that you can put in your dive shop and supporting your customers. But sometimes you have to take a little bit of a step back and look at getting into a new dealer agreement. And I've outlined kind of some of those things that I would look at. before I would enter into a new dealer agreement and bring product in. And I wanted to share those with everybody. First and foremost is I've always looked at it from a fit into my existing inventory. How does it work? Does it fill gaps that I have out there? And is it going to compete with my existing inventory? Because I've said in the past, inventory looks like an asset on your balance sheet, but it's really a liability until you sell it. So if you bring product in, new stuff that's going to compete with the stuff that you already have, you got to think about that. And then, like Catherine said, what's the value proposition for that new piece of gear? Why is that something you have in your dive shop? So fit into your existing product line is important. And then right along that lines is the competitive advantage. Is this something that nobody else in your area has, something new that you're going to be the first ones to have out there and you're going to get ahead of the market? Or are you playing catch up? Is it that must have? If you don't have it, you're putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage. So a couple of considerations there. And then once we move down that path, I start thinking about the financial aspects of it. How much money do I have to put in to get this agreement in place? What's my opening order buy? And then how quickly am I going to see that return on investment from that initial investment? And what you have to really also get into that detail, what's your ongoing buying levels to keep that margin in place? So you have to really look at that financial aspect of it in the dealer agreement. And then are you going to have any restrictions? Are you going to be able to sell this stuff online if you have an online store? Some dealers may not let you do that. And then finally, the last piece of it is the operational aspects of it. What's that sales support team look like? Inside sales, is somebody going to pick up the phone when you have a question, when you need them, when you have an issue to be resolved? How responsive are those dealers? And do they have a good B2B system, someplace where you can go in and check inventory, make your orders, figure out what your delivery schedules are, what your discount levels are at, what your free freight levels are? Do they have a really good B2B system? And then my final two considerations on entering that agreement are, what's their product availability? A lot of times you may find that there's a lot of equipment that's out there, but you just might not be able to get it because it's not available. We saw a lot of that supply chain challenges with the COVID. It's gotten a lot better. And then finally, how quickly are you going to get it? Is it going to take me a week to get it? Am I going to get it overnight, 2 days? I wrote an article earlier or last year about why we need to be an at-once world because we can't have all this inventory. So are those new dealers that you're entering into going to be able to deliver it quickly? So fit into your existing inventory, competitive advantage, the financial aspects, and then operationally, how's it going to work? All those things you got to look at. It's easy to get into a new dealer agreement, but you really have to know what you're doing.
Good stuff.
And I'm going to say also at the end of Jeff's article on page 21, 22, there's a QR code. Click on that QR code if you're looking at the digital version, or if you're picking up the print version, you can use your phone, and that'll email directly to Jeff. And I'm sure he'd be more than happy to talk to you. I know he does consulting on this kind of thing, but if you're a retailer out there, he's got a lifetime of experience you could probably tap into.
Well, thank you. Absolutely. All right, next up, it's off to Gil in California, page 18, part 1, how to blue your business in 2025 and make more green. Now, this is a loaded question, but how do you blue your business? I'm a little worried about this, Gil, but that's probably just me.
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. So bluing your business means making your business more environmentally friendly.
Oh, good. Thank God.
We call the ocean the blue. We swim in it, we snorkel in it, we dive in it, and we want to leverage what we can with all the tools everyone's talking about, especially Alex's. That was a great idea about the credits for carbon. But all these things we can do that I listed in my article, I have 7 suggestions for bluing your business. One is, of course, reducing your plastic use. Willie was telling me that when he was in the Caymans last year, he was on a dive boat, and they handed out little paper cups for everyone to use to drink water instead of passing out plastic water bottles, which can accidentally end up in the ocean. So I suggest tell your clients to bring their own thermos with their own beverages, or you give them water or whatever, but bring their own thermos so you don't have to worry about plastic going into the ocean. So that's one suggestion. Two is bluing your events. Like my dive club sponsors Blue Friday. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but holding events that have a blue halo, so to speak, can help blue your business and give everyone warm fuzzies about what you're doing for them and the environment as well. Another thing you can do is increasing the sustainability of what you offer by reducing packaging materials. Why do we get a package of why do we buy new flippers and they come with all this plastic and everything? You don't need that. Just paper wrapping, or see how Amazon has changed over the years from huge paper boxes or cardboard boxes to smaller packaging to envelopes. So use less material in your packaging. And then the fourth thing you can do is install solar panels on your liveaboards or on your dive shop or your warehouse to reduce your carbon footprint. Another thing that I strongly recommend is only using reef-safe sunscreen. It's hard to say, reef-safe sunscreen. I know in a lot of places now, like Palau and Hawaii and for certain parts of Mexico, Virgin Islands, Key West, they only allow sunscreen that is reef safe. And 6, do volunteers like my dive club to have beach cleanup, debris cleanups. And 7, become a green business, which means use less paper. I've been in green business for like 20 years for myself. So use recycled paper, use LED lights. You do everything you can to have a smaller carbon footprint. So then getting back to Blue Friday, I want to thank Terry Cummings. This year, he and his wife participated in Blue Friday out in the Coral Sea. We had divers this year in more places, in more oceans than ever before. And ironically, Ken Carter of my dive club, who started Blue Friday, which was diving on Black Friday instead of shopping, he was in New York. He was going to go diving, but it was freezing rain. He said, "I'm not going." But we had divers from our club go in Kona. We had divers from our club go in the Channel Islands, 60 miles off the coast. I have a friend who went in San Diego, and we had 2 dive shops that I know in Roatan and the Mexican Caribbean who participated. But this year, I want to ask everyone here to be a Blue Friday ambassador. I want to get Alex in Florida and Kathy in the Azores and people in all over the Caribbean and Europe, everywhere we can, to participate in Blue Friday this year and make it truly a viral event. It's at the tipping point now, but we can do a little more or write an article to tell more about it in September, so we have a 2-month head start. But if you look at the link for my website, my dive club website, Marin Scuba Club, you'll see a blog that recaps all of the activities for Blue Friday 4.0 this year. Thank you.
Yeah, love it. And I'm glad you clarified it because Neil Watson, I think he's working blue, but it's just because he's cold.
I'm freezing, man. I'm freezing.
And I've been working blue for like 27 years. Kind of totally different issue that I've tried to avoid authorities, but it's worked out well. So thank you for that, Gil. All right, next off, are we ready for the next one, Willie? Or do you got another comment?
I was just going to say, so Carlos Lander has written a couple of books. He just published his 2nd book on diving, and he is based out of Caracas, Venezuela, and I happen to be about 75 miles from him right now. I'm down in Curacao. So, but Carlos reached out to us several months ago and asked if he could, do some writing for us. He's an instructor and a professional in that country. And I said, Carlos, why don't you focus on the Southern Caribbean? A lot of people don't. Everybody's heard of Curacao. Everybody knows about Bonaire, but nobody heard about a place called Margarita Island, and nobody knows about a place called San Andreas Island. And then you got parks all along Colombia and Venezuela and all the way to Trinidad and Tobago that no one's ever even heard of. Now, Tobago's somewhat popular, but So he's going to be focusing his series over the next few months on some of these other really, really kind of out of the way, but yet they offer excellent diving. So for a dive shop that's looking to do something a little different, little out of the norm, he's got some great suggestions. So I'm going to turn that over to Carlos for that long introduction.
Welcome, Carlos, and Happy New
Hey,
Year.
hey, how are you? Hello there. Well, continue our journey through the Caribbean. Today we're heading to Trinidad and Tobago. So the question here is why to go there? Well, it's something remarkable because Trinidad and Tobago is nearly in mainland Venezuela. If you're a giant, imagine you're a giant. If you go and do a big step, you go into Trinidad and Tobago. But the main thing is that Trinidad is not good for diving, but Tobago is. And the explanation is, I don't know if maybe you can, no.
We see a blank screen.
But the main thing is that if you go to Trinidad and located you in south of the map, you see that the Orinoco River goes to the Atlantic, and you see the delta. So if you see Trinidad, it's very, very, very near to the delta. So every sediment from the river goes to Trinidad. So actually the diving there in Trinidad is very bad. So what you need to do is go to Tobago, which is amazing. Why it's amazing? Because it's up north, just right in the corner of the Atlantic. So it's a confluence from two waters. You see Caribbean waters coming from the west, and the east, you see the Atlantic. So that confluence of water make a remarkable dive. And you see very enormous pelagic life. Also, you will see the reef there.
Yeah, I believe, Carlos, doesn't Tobago have like one of the largest spring corals in the world? I did that years ago, and I think I remember going to a site
yes, indeed,
like
indeed.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And some of this remarkable sign that you can fly over there. You don't need to dive, you need to fly over there in the sense that all is drift diving. So you go there, submerge yourself in the water, and you will drift all over the reef. So it's beautiful there. And there are only five dive centers and operators there. So it will be very easy to you from your own dive center to contact them. And as always said in this kind of island, is that always plan your group, always plan your trip with a dive center. Don't go there by yourself. And they're very rural islands, and you need to know how to move there. So the best you can do is contact a dive center that is already there. There are locals, and they will plan and help you all the way with their trip, from where you're going to stay, where are you going to dive, and how other activities you can do. As always said, it sells better if you do extra activities on land. For example, you go dive one day, 2 days, and the other day you can go and visit the forest, which, by the way, is the forest. I think, if I remember well, is from the 18th centuries. So it's a beautiful forest. You can have rivers cascade over inland, so you can mix activities, and that's very good for your customers. So, do you have any questions?
Yeah, well, it's been a few years
Yes,
since I've been there.
Like,
it's quite nice for sure.
And just like on Jeff's article, at the end of Carlos's article, you can click on his QR code and you can ask him, "Hey, Carlos, where did you dive with?" Because he dove with a center down there. Who was it that you were diving with, Carlos, in Tobago?
Derek.
I think we credited him on the photos. I can't remember the name offhand.
Yeah, Derek. Derek has dive centers there, and he took the photograph. So he's amazing. He's an amazing person. He's very welcoming, and he's one of the 5 dive centers there. He's located at the south, which is more easy diving. But if you go to the north, you will find also good dive centers there. but if you have a group that is very novice, it's better to go to the south, the island. In that regard, is the drift is very low
See,
compared to north.
uh, and that's really good insight. And that's why, if you're a dive shop out there and or a travel agent, you're thinking about trying to start a group trip down there, reach out to Carlos. He can give that insight, because that's the kind of things that's hard to find online when you says, look, this is a great place for a group that's new or experienced or whatever. Thank you, Carlos. Great article. Keep them coming.
Thank you very much indeed.
There you go. All right. Next up, we got
Sure.
David and Lily from Texas, page 30 in Scuba Diving Industry Magazine, part 1 of 3-part series. What dive travel means to retailers. David, Lily?
So let me stop for 2 seconds and
Okay,
just give
go
a
ahead,
little
Willie.
intro for these, because they're brand new writers. Thank you for writing for us, by the way. They're brand new writers to us. They are extremely experienced writers in our industry. They've written probably for every magazine on the planet, every online zine there is. And they were very key in Mark Young's publications, Dive Center Business Magazine, which is our predecessor, and made it possible for us to even have this magazine. And of course, Dive Training, which was fantastic resources. So they're very, very experienced, and they're doing a 3-part series that I think is really good, aimed at the retail and at dive retailers. So I'm going to let you guys take it from there, David and Lily.
Yeah, welcome.
Well, thank you. I know you had asked before about what are some of the key takeaways for this series, and we came up with 3 of them that are pretty key for this. One is that dive centers need to understand that their customers want a scuba adventure somewhere that feeds their desires, because to have an exotic dive experience, this is why they got certified in the first place. So you don't want your customers to have to look elsewhere to find dive trips when you can provide them with their dream vacation and keep their loyalty and their revenue with your business. Another key takeaway on this would be that when the customer signs up for your trips, that's just the beginning of your profit revenue. If you make a point that each time when you're working with them to work in continuing education classes before and during the trip, especially when you're trip leaders and instructor, and also that these things will enhance their diving experience, along with also the gear and accessory sales related to the trip. Because most dive centers already push the idea of owning your own gear that you must trust, that you can trust. And a dive trip is a great time to remind them that this is of this, and that it's something that you advise them about specific items that might aid them in this specific location, sort of like Palau with the reef hooks and things of that nature. So, Lily, you got another one?
Yes. So the third consideration for dive centers is when you're putting your package together, the wholesalers will usually offer a standard group package. Well, what you want to do is differentiate your package from others and make it special. So one of the things you can do, for example, especially if you have a large group going, is to negotiate with the wholesaler and ask for additional value add type extras, such as, for example, free nitrox if it's not already included in the package, or massages, or even group discounts on excursions they may have, trips to town or village tour, something that will be special, that will make the experience special for them. Things to do on land as well as in the water, waterfall trips, sunset cruises, etc. And you want to set your trip apart and make it memorable for your customers, so they'll think about doing the next trip with you as well.
Right. They always want to get, your customers are usually wanting to get the best bang for their buck. And if they compare trips, then you'll say, oh, this is the way to go. So this is who I need to do business with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Deliver those 3 items. I think you got a customer for years to come if you deliver on the goods there. That sounds good stuff.
Absolutely.
Look forward to parts 2 and 3 in the upcoming
Thank you.
weeks on Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Good stuff indeed. All right, so we're going to wrap
Thank you,
things
David.
up. Yeah, thanks, guys. And
Nope,
we're going to wrap things up in Australia. Is that right, Willie? We're going to go down under?
We are, but before I turn it over to Terry, this is this article is near and dear to my heart, because for 30 years I had the pleasure of working with Neil Watson as chairman and executive on the Dive Marketing Committee, which was a public sector and private sector co-op committee set up to help the government spend their money on diving, and by the private sector being involved, they ensured that the government funds were spent in the most efficient and effective way. It truly was a personification of what Terry just wrote about. And when you sent this article to me, I thought, this is exactly what made the Bahamas so successful for so many years, is this true partnership. Wouldn't you agree, Neil, with the government and the private sector?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, Willie, years and years ago, the government was very generous in terms of funding marketing for the dive industry. But we had a New York ad agency that didn't know what they were doing, throwing away the money. And we went to government, you and me and Stuart and a few other people, and sat down with the new minister of tourism and said, look, we appreciate the money that you're allocating, but we could make it go so much further with our input. We're experts, and we'll do it for nothing. Just let us have input. And the minister of tourism says, absolutely, we'll give it a shot. We put together a private sector with government committee, and the industry exploded for the Bahamas. I mean, Willie, you did an amazing job, and kudos to your accomplishments.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Neil. And I thought that's a perfect segue for Terry, because I think that's exactly what you tried to write about in this article, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how it came about, actually. Many years ago, I was sitting over a sandy bank and looking at a sand goby playing around in his life with his blind shrimp that, basically kept house while he kept guard. And I thought, what a wonderful partnership. And more recently, I filmed an octopus and a cod working together. And these are the partnerships underwater that we can learn about and apply in our own business endeavors. And basically, to make sure that we are sustainable, we have to realize that we can't do it on our own, as you just said there, Willie. It's the partnerships I'm talking about are not those partnerships we read about in the newspapers. They're partnerships where they're virtually verbal, they're non-legal in many, many respects, but they have a lot of interest for the people because they have a mutual goal. And so what I've written about in this article is talking about how you can actually start by looking for partners early. Once you've identified what you actually want to do and what that goal is. And I think that it's pretty easy. Some of the partnerships in the dive industry that we have are no-brainers. And I say that in the article. One's with your training agency, one's with your equipment manufacturers, etc. But think outside the box and start to think about those partnerships that could actually help your business and help your partner's business by creating these liaisons. And one of the things that I illustrated there was, it's really funny, with Dive Queensland, we've just recently sent out our newsletter, and one of the points I wanted to mention is the dive industry is not just about the dive industry, it's about airlines, it's about food, it's about hotels, it's about a whole bunch of stuff outside of our actual core business. And that's where we start to look for good partnerships. And one of the examples I used in the articles was maybe it's your local hotel for a dive operator that you set up some agreement to swap kind of information about people and encourage people to go diving from the hotel and from the dive operator to make sure that people have good accommodation, someone that you respect, and little things like that. So it's not a really a big thing. It's something that can be really, really simple. It doesn't have to be complex. And I would think that one of the things that I could wrap this up real quick for you, William, is to say, look at what we're doing right here. Look at what we are really doing right here. We have got a bunch of fantastic writers from all over the world that are coming together with mutual ideas about sharing our expertise and gaining that information, not only for ourselves from one another, but also sharing it on this wonderful podcast right across the globe. And as a parting shot, I have to say, congratulations to you, because this is a wonderful partnership we're in right now.
kudos.
Terry. I appreciate that. Thank you, Neil, and everybody. Thank you again. This is when I was standing at the DEMA show, we did a resource center. It's kind of like where you do a seminar right on the show floor. It's a really cool concept they have, and you don't have to leave the floor to actually go to a seminar. And we had 45 minutes, and I'm thinking, man, nobody's going to show up to this thing. There might be a few passerbys, and myself and our little crew that was there. We had standing room only, and it has nothing to do with me. Everybody wanted to hear you guys. They wanted to hear what Jeff had to say. They wanted to hear what Alex had to say. And it's really quite remarkable. And that's what this has really become. It's about you guys. And next month, I'm going to give a shout out to Christian Dimitris. He's out of Brazil, Rio, Brazil. He's actually become quite the National Geographic shooter these days. He's going to have an incredible cover for us, I believe, from the Amazon. Reef Smart's got a new 3D mapping software project out, and we've got an art. It's already been written about it. It's fantastic. Al Hornsby was the former senior vice president over at Patty. Is retired, and he is probably knows more about liability and diving than anybody on this planet. And he is starting a regular series, and he did the first of the series just this month on the business of liability. He kind of really just teed up his article. So thank you, Terry, for that. And thank you for that really nice article as well. Keep them coming.
From down under, they'll keep coming for sure. I have no doubt. And I'll speak for myself. I mean, to me, it's all about relationships, right? And paying it forward. We've been around the block a time or two in this industry. And if anything I've learned over the years is that when you get to share what you've learned to the newbies coming into the industry, it just makes you feel good about yourself a little bit. You guys with me on that?
Yeah, it sure does.
Okay. Absolutely. All right. Well, that will do it for this month's edition of Level Up, the podcast for Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. I am Greg the Dive Master. For myself and the rest of the crew, well, remember, it's always better down where it's wetter.
Yeah.
This has been Level Up, the podcast of Scuba Diving Industry Magazine. Produced by ScubaRadio and the Klein Group. For more info, go to ScubaDivingIndustry.com.